Alright, welcome back to the Code Bakery. Today we're going to be building in our Flask series, and today we're going to build a note managing app. It's going to use Flask Bootstrap, which is another library that's going to make our application look nicer, and then Flask Pymongo, which is going to connect us to a database, allowing us to actually save the data we put in. So it's quite simple to set up our project. We're going to be building on the project that we set up in the last episode, so make sure to go watch that. And today we're going to be just manipulating that in a little bit, in a small manner, so that we can create our notes application. So to start off, we need to import our libraries. We're going to do from Flask import everything, which is the asterisk sign, from Flask Bootstrap import Bootstrap, and then from Flask Pymongo import Pymongo. If you need to install any of these libraries, just go to your terminal and then do pip install either Flask Bootstrap, or Flask Pymongo. So now that you have those libraries installed, we're gonna change our basic Flask syntax. So this is showing the name of our project, and so right now we want to change it to Note Manager. And then another thing that we want to do is this is like basic syntax that we need to configure our database. Is that we're gonna type in app.config. Then we're going to do square brackets in double quotes Mongo underscore URI equals this long string. So this is basically saying the local host of your computer followed by whatever database name. So database name. This is a manipulated variable, so this can be whatever we want. So for this case, let's do note-db, which is, we'll do notes-db, so the notes database, right? So then in our app, we're only going to have one main route, so we can keep that. But another thing that we need to do just to lay the ground of the syntax for Bootstrap and Pymongo is we need to type bootstrap of our app. This is initializing everything, and then we also write Mongo equals Pymongo of our app. This is another initialized. So this is the basic syntax that we need. Lines 5 through 9 are the basic syntax that we need to set everything up. And now we'll be able to move on to the direct route, where we'll be able to make the back end, which is how like the server-side framework that works. So we will only need one route, so we can delete this. And then in our index, what we want to do is we want to allow the index to have two methods. It will be methods equals get and post. And so what are get and post? So get is when the user just wants the server to send back information, and then post is going to be when the user has input that they want to send to the server, who is going to take that input and do something. In our case, which is like the majority case, the user is going to take input, send it to the server, and the server is going to save that input in a database. So just to repeat, get is when the user wants something, post is when the user wants to post something. Well, it's why it's called post. So what we have to do is we have to check if the user's method is either a get or a post method. And the way we can do this is through Flask syntax. So if request, which is what the user is sending, dot method equals get, then we want to return code for user get, and then elif request method equals post. Then we want to return code for user post. All right, so let's start. We can also delete this. So this is very basic. So let's start actually putting the real code that we're going to use into these methods. That's going to allow us to properly make our app function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to start with the post section. So what's going to happen is the user is going to have an input field. They're going to type something in and click submit. that is going to activate our post. And so what we want to do is we're going to type document equals blank, and that's 2 curly braces, and then for item in request form document of item is equal to request.form of item. So this is filling the document with the user's input, and then we're going to write mongo.db.note collection, which is just, this is any name that we're wanting. So we're creating a database that's, we're creating a collection that's called DB, and this is going to be the specific name. So we can do note collection dot insert one document. And so these lines of code are taking what the user has put in a form, and we're going to talk about that later on. So they're taking what the user has put in the form and they're putting that into our database. So once we have a set amount of things that the user has put in the database, we want to take that information and show it to the user. That's what we're going to do in the get method. So what we're going to write is documents, which is another variable, equals mongo.db.note collection, just copy that over, dot find. And so that's going to take the documents in our database and return them to this documents variable. And what we want to return render template index.html with saved notes, which is a variable that we're going to pass into our HTML as we talked about in last time. And we're going to take that and we're going to pass in documents. All right. So that was really simple, but very effective, as this is all the code you need to create a working full stack application. So we'll save that, and now we're going to move to the front end, because this is the back end. We're going to move to the front end where we're going to use Bootstrap to tidy everything up and make our application look a little bit nicer. So this login HTML file is a remnant of our past project, and since we're manipulating the first series to create our node application, we don't need it and we can just delete it. So moving on to our home template. As you can see, this is a very basic HTML document, and what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to populate it with some information. However, because we're using Bootstrap, let me remind you guys, we're using Flask Bootstrap. What we can do is we can take this and we can actually delete it, because we're going to be using Bootstrap to try as the basis for our HTML page. So Flask Bootstrap has specific syntax that allows you to get Bootstrap, which is a library of CSS that basically makes our web page look nice without us having to do a lot of work. So this is important, and then this is essentially a loop that we need. This is a block of code specifying that anything in between these two lines is going to have Bootstrap properties enabled to it. And then we're going to put more information. We're going to do block title. And then we're going to also write end block. And then in between this, we're going to put our title, which is web server with Flask. Actually, it's note manager with Flask. So this is setting up the title of our document, which is the thing that shows up at the very beginning, and then not on the page, but in the tab section. So I'll show you that once we run the project. And then we can also go to, now we'll just write a simple div with a style of a margin of 2%, 3%. And so what is this? This is going to act as a container for our project, and margin just means I want to move it. In this case, I want to move it from the top 2% down and from the left 3% to the right. So in this container, I'm going to write in H1, which is going to be titled My Notes. Then I'm going to have a form, and this is where the user's input is going to be. So this is the entire thing. This is very important. So yeah, and I'm going to write method equals post. So if we go back to our server, we see when the method is post, it'll do this. And so submitting this form is going to call a post method to our home method, or our home route. Sorry about that. So in our form, we want two inputs. We want one input that is type equals text. This is going to be the user submission, and we're going to name it new note. And then we'll have the second input for type submit. And we can just set the value to be safe because this is the text that's going to show up on the HTML document. All right, so now we can, underneath this form, we're going to display the information that the user has put in. And so to do that, it'll just be a div, and divs act as containers in HTML. Obviously, you guys should have some experience with HTML because we have done HTML tutorials. So if you're a little bit inexperienced with HTML, go make sure to watch those, and then you can come back here. So yeah, but right now we're only doing very basic HTML, so you should be able to follow along. And yeah, so what we're going to be doing is we want to loop through everything in our notes database and display that on our page. So in order to do that, how are we going to use a for loop in HTML? This is not Python, and so the way we use loops in HTML is through these curly braces. So we're going to write this and then for note in. Remember, save notes is the variable that we passed in prior. And then we're going to write h3. We're going to pass in note of new dash note. And then close that h3. And then we're going to make sure to end our for loop. End for. There we go. So there's a couple of things now that we've essentially finished up the HTML. There's a couple of things, loose ends that we need to tie up in order to get our program fully functioning. First, what we need to do is we're going to have block title, then end block, then block content showing this, highlighting this as our content, and then the end block for our block content. So make sure you add this line in right here. Then once you've added in that line, make sure to check that everything's like this. Otherwise, there are no problems with the HTML. However, there are a couple of things that we need to tie up in the server.py. So up until line 9, all of this basic syntax laid out, that's all good. Then even our get method, that is good. And you just need to make sure that index.html is our index.html, because in the prior lesson, we named our first file as home.html, not index.html. So you want to make sure that they're the same file. Then in our post method, we want to make sure that it's for item in request.form, not without any parentheses, as in Python, for loops are just for item in request. They don't use parentheses. They just have a colon at the end. And then finally, once the post method is done, we want to return the home route in a get method, which is it'll essentially reload our page. And so no matter what, even if you have a get or a post, you always want to return something, whether it'll be a render template or a redirect to which will essentially be a get method, which will then render the template. So yeah, those are just a couple of the loose ends that we had to quickly tie up. And now all you have to do is you have to save both and just simply run. And then we can open up our code. Create terminal. We'll be able to output, stop our code run, and we'll be able to start the code run. As you can see, it says Note Manager Production Server running on this local port 5000. Then when you drag that over, we can see that it says My Notes. I've already written coding, and then so we can say YouTube, click Save. As you can see, it saved it to our database and displays it here. Then we can write hello. And so, yeah, as we can see, our application is fully functioning, that whatever we type, and we can also see that our data is getting saved because they're still there. And so, yeah, now we know our application is fully functioning. This is the first full stack application we've built, and it was very simple. It only took a little bit of time, and as you can see, just by the minimal lines of code, it's very easy to build a full stack application. And so now, what we're going to be doing, progressing in the series, is we're going to be building on this, trying to move to more complex applications, such as the e-commerce website I demoed in the first series. So yeah, hopefully you like that, and thank you.